The smallest act of kindness is worth more than the greatest intention. Khalil Gibran. Welcome to the Guyana Dialogue. I'm your host, Shamiza Ali. Our topic tonight is the state of secondary education in Guyana. The Guyana Dialogue is being sponsored by a coordinating council of Guyanese based in the US, UK, Canada, the Caribbean, and Guyana. Funding support is by well-known philanthropist Dave Narayan from Dave West Indian Imports. Please welcome my moderator for tonight, Dr. Tara Singh. He is a distinguished political and social scientist.
Thank you
Our
very much,
panelists
Lisa.
tonight are Dr. Muniram Budu and Dr. Ganga Ramdas.
Hello,
Our
Shamiza.
guest
Hello,
tonight,
viewers.
welcome, Dr. Tara. Our guest tonight is the Minister of Education, the Honorable Priya Manickchand. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Good evening, everybody.
All right.
Good evening.
First, let us apologize for this late start. We had some technical issues which has just been resolved. And thank you for your understanding. Now it's a pleasure to have the Honorable Minister of Education, Priya Manickchand, with us today. I know she's extremely busy like the other ministers. Most of the time they spend in the fields taking government to the people. We have been trying to get her for a long while, but because she was engaged and got to travel through the country, we couldn't. So we are thankful that we have her here tonight. Before we start, I know our topic tonight, we can focus primarily on secondary education. But I want to ask you something now that usually graduating over 3,000 students. You have an idea, it may not necessarily be your area, but how if most of these people will be employed or they will pursue further education, master's, PhD, or what? You have any idea?
It's a good question. The government states generally have a responsibility not necessarily to provide employment, but to provide an environment where people who are qualified could get employed. I'm happy to say that Guyana's government has hired more people because we have expanding services, but also because we were interested in making sure we had people had income. So we found creative ways of making sure everybody could live. So we've actually expanded our hiring system, including with programs like the 10-day workers and the SIP workers, where we try to create employment, but also creating an environment in the private sector companies, businesses, small or large, could thrive and therefore hire more people. When we give one house lot for someone to build their home on it, people have to be hired. The truck driver who is going to bring the sand, the skilled workers who are graduating from the TVET institutions, the contractor who's hopefully got a management degree or a project management degree, the engineers, the architects who have to draw. So it's not only government hiring, it's government creating an environment where more people can be hired in various sectors. And we've seen that by the number of people who have become employed gainfully and can therefore look after themselves over the last 3 to 4 years.
All right, thank you. Now,
UG has done a beautiful job of highlighting the diversity in their graduates. And so you see persons from the hinterland, from regions 5 and 6, from region 2, from all over, doing a variety of different things, studying in a variety of different fields. And so I think the highlighting has given a good sense of where the country is. 3,500 is the largest number that we've graduated since. We also just had a graduation 2 weeks ago, I think, of trained teachers from the Cyril Potter College of Education, which amounted to 1,502 persons who graduated. And again, you saw there graduates from regions 1 through 10. So the picture is changing. There was one time in Guyana when we had one single doctor of Amerindian descent And that's no longer so. There was one time when we had one single lawyer of Amerindian descent, well, visibly and substantially uh, from the hinterland region. That is no longer so. I just had dinner with the students of regions of Hugh Wooding Law School years 1 and 2, and of the 72 children, I think I had dinner with 65 of them, so the majority of them, and there were two girls from Region 1. There was one from Region 9. It was beautiful to see. And those are, it sounds small to you, but I went to law school and there was nobody from regions 1, 7, 8, and 9. And I'd not seen in my years preceding me people from there also.
Yeah, one of the reason why I asked whether all these graduates should be employed, because if they can't find employment in Guyana, they'll definitely move overseas. Because the UN study showed that most of the graduates at the tertiary level would have left Guyana and migrated overseas. So,
Well, two things there, Dr. Tara. Some countries made it unconscionably easy for graduates to leave without reinvesting back in the country and in training people. And a lot of places where graduates left based on their graduate degrees, they weren't able to go and use those skills in those fields in those countries. So they were allowed to self sponsor, say, to North America or a country in North America as an engineer, but they weren't allowed to go and work as an engineer when they got there. They had to go back to school and so on. So it, like I said, might not have been, a fair practice either to the country as a whole or to people who left thinking they'd be able to get jobs in those countries. And I think, you probably know this better than me, but it's not been easy for persons who migrated. Guyana has changed significantly. I know there was a time when we used to bleed teachers to various countries. I have cousins who went to Botswana because I come from a family of teachers, and I have very good friends who went to the Bahamas. We used to have plane loads going out. We don't see that now. We're not seeing that in the country right now. In fact, what we get at the Ministry of Education is teachers coming to us to say, I'm returning and I want to reconnect my service so that they have a continuous service. So we're not seeing a mass exodus. At the same time, with the world being the global village that it is, there are some skills that people would find more useful and would get more experience in countries that are using those skills more. Marine biology, or if you want to go to space and work on building a rocket. And so there are different ways and different reasons people leave. I'm not saying people won't ever leave, but I think it's with the connectivity of the world, we should expect that people will. But we're not seeing what we used to see before,
okay,
where the ambition of every
I,
family is to
I,
get out. We're not seeing that.
I didn't include, when I said over 3,000 graduates, I didn't include those who graduated from the gold program.
No,
Um,
no.
okay, all right,
That was specifically UG graduates,
okay.
3,500.
Um, in a previous program, you have said that you have achieved universal primary education, and you had indicated at that point that secondary education, you're hoping to achieve universal secondary education in a short while from now. Can you please elaborate a little on that?
So not I said, the United Nations has deemed us as having achieved universal primary education, which simply means that wherever we need primary school or wherever we have children of primary age, they can access a primary school. Having said that, we're still building because we're looking to make sure that children are comfortable and schools are not overcrowded. We're looking to achieve universal secondary education. What that means is that every child of secondary age should be allowed to access a high quality secondary education. Right now, in Region 1, we're building 5 secondary schools. At Matthews Ridge, we just finished one at Northwest, at Hosororo, which again is in Mabaruma, at Waramuri, which is in the Maruka subregion, and Quebana, which is also in the Maruka subregion. In Region 2, we built back the Abram Zool Secondary just had a consultation about where we would build a cotton field secondary or rebuild a cotton field secondary. We're looking at making what is now an annex full secondary school. In Region 3, we're building a secondary school at Tushen. I just turned this on this afternoon for one on the West Bank at Neems. It's going to be an 800 children school costing us about 1.3 billion. And we're looking for land to build at Vreden Hoop. In Region 4, we completed the Good Hope Secondary, Yarra Secondary, and we're about to begin two buildings at Prospect, two secondary schools, and at Caneville, both on the east bank of Demerara. In Region 5, we don't need secondary schools. We might need some transportation. In Region 6, we began construction at Oriala Secondary. In Region 7, we're building at Jawala, at Karau, at probably one more in the Upper Mazaruni. We're reforming and rehabilitating all the dorms currently in the region. In Region 8, we're building three secondary schools, one at Monkey Mountain, one at Kopinang, and one more, three secondary schools. And in Region 9, we're building six secondary schools, one at Tapachinga, which is in Lethem. The president turned the sod for that 2 or 3 weeks ago. One at Mawaranao, one at Napi, one at Masara, one at Karasabai. The president visited that recently also, and one more in the region. And in Region 10, we're going to rebuild from scratch the Christianberg Secondary. We're also building in Georgetown, rebuilding the St. Mary Secondary, Christchurch Secondary, and we've extended a whole set of schools. So that takes us to about 26 secondary schools that are currently under construction. And that sounds like, it's 26, it's not that large, but I'll give you a couple of stats so that you understand the magnitude of what we've undertaken in a very short space of time. In the APNU's term in office, they didn't begin or finish a single secondary school. So in that 5 years, from 2015 to 2020, not a single secondary school started nor was finished in the APNU term. We're building 26. From 1992 to 2015, when we came in 1992, there were three hinterland secondary schools: St. Ignatius, Bartica, if you consider Bartica hinterland, it really is not, and Mabaroma Northwest Secondary. By the time we left in 2015, we had 13 secondary schools. So even with no money, with malnutrition, with maternal mortality high, with the highest debt at 97 cents for every dollar that we were paying at that time, the PPP government still found money to make sure we built 13 more secondary schools than we found in the hinterland communities. So it is what we do when we're in government. We make sure whatever resources exist, everyone gets a little bit of it, and a lot is focused on education. When we came in 92, about 2% of our budget, 2 to 6% was being spent on education. By the time we left, it was 15 to 18%. So there's always been a different emphasis by us on education.
Thank you. Just before I pass you on to Professor Boudou, just if you can indicate if you have enough teachers for these schools that you're building.
So it's a good question. We are training more teachers numerically and qualitatively than we have ever trained before. So in 2020, when I came into office, we had just over 10,000 teachers. We now have over 14,000 teachers. And we are training more than we've ever trained. So historically, CPC would be able to graduate just about 535 teachers a year. That's the maximum number they were ever able to graduate. We've expanded the college in many different ways, by going online, by creating new satellite centers across the country, by staffing them differently, by allowing more teachers to join the program, and by insisting that if you're going to teach, you have to be trained. So that's our policy. We're not letting untrained teachers stay in the system for too long. And so last year we graduated 1,778 teachers. This year, we graduated 1,502 teachers. So we have a numerically larger amount and more trained teachers in the system. Do we need more? The answer probably, not probably, the answer is yes, particularly in the specialized areas. We're going to launch very soon health and family life education as a major. We just graduated our first batch of special education needs teachers. We didn't have that as a program before. Um, so teachers like for PE and music and some of the TVET subjects are in that are in demand are in short supply, and so we have to keep training. We believe our class sizes simply because of the numbers have reduced, but you still see that it's an imbalance in the reduction. The reduction looks good on paper, and it is actually good, but some classrooms might have 15 students while one might have 40. So that we're still trying to make sure everybody has under 30 children in the classroom for secondary education.
Thank you very much, Professor Boudou. Over to you.
Minister, I'm glad to see you again. I want to follow up on a discussion on Guyanese history we had the last time you were on this program. You said that Guyanese history is taught as part of Caribbean history. At a press conference last week, VP Jack Dale stated that he was appalled that youths he met during one of his outreach programs did not know even recent historical events. There are substantially rich, rather unique materials on the history of Guyana, and there are reputable Guyanese historians and others, especially in the diaspora, who can tell Guyana's story to Guyanese from kindergarten to higher education and beyond. As a policymaker for education, would you consider developing textbooks and learning materials and implement dedicated courses on Guyanese history in schools and higher education?
So I'm glad you asked that. It's several questions in one. So let me attempt both. Well, the two that I heard. We shouldn't equate Guyanese history with what CXC teaches because that's a very specific curriculum that is, comparatively speaking, adapted to what students around the world at that age would be expected to know in history, where we came from, those kinds, from where we came, how society evolved. However, so that's one thing, and we are writing a Caribbean exam, and so we have to prepare our children for that. I do believe, though, that it's important for a country to grow and develop by learning, by their young people learning of their recent, midterm, and previous and long-term history. And it's important, particularly in our country, where we have had peculiar situations that we do not want to see repeat themselves. So I think it's important that we have, and it doesn't always have to be through the formal education system. So that's what we have to build out. That educating our young people, educating people about different aspects of country or religion or culture does not always have to come through the education, the formal education system, the schools. It can be, especially when with the advent of communication that is so wide now. For example, you could have a Zoom class with 1,000 children or 1,000 young people, and should we use persons who are experts in the field of history and Guyanese history from overseas? Absolutely, because it's so easy to do now. So I think the answer is yes to both. I would make sure that we are doing Caribbean history that has our peculiar Guyanese history in the curriculum for CSEC, but I would also say we shouldn't stop at that because it will not go in depth into certain aspects of Guyanese history that I think people should know, that I think you are also referring to. That it's important for us to acknowledge where we came from, understand what that journey, the harms and benefits of that journey, with a view to making sure we either don't repeat those mistakes or that we amplify on the benefits that we have.
Would you consider giving this a priority because I think it's important that Guyanese know their history and know the link between the Guyanese history itself and the rest of the Caribbean. But I think
Mm,
there's a lot of unique characteristics in Guyana that doesn't get reproduced in other parts of the Caribbean that people need
mm-hmm,
to know about. And I'm
mm-hmm.
wondering whether you will consider this a
Such
priority.
as, tell me what you're thinking. Like what?
Right. For example, is there a coffee anywhere else? There's, when I do history, I learned West Indian history. It was more about Haiti, right, than anything else. And I learned about British history when I was in Guyana. Nothing about my own history, about indentured servants, about slavery, about the
Mm-hmm,
border issues, right, that we have, about the dictatorship, right, about the problems during dictatorship, and those types of things, right, that are unique to Guyana. Indentured servants, right? Although indentured servants come in Guyana and other parts of the Caribbean, there are distinct features of Guyanese history that we need to know. The Enmore Mart, for example, the Wisma massacre, right?
I'm
These are
happy
things
to
we need
tell
to know.
you, right. So some of them, if we were to speak frankly here, some of them have political undertones that
Hmm.
we'd have to carefully craft for, especially for younger children, which is why I think outside the school might be a better place. But I'm happy to tell you that we're teaching from primary school. And I know this because I just had two children who exited primary school. I mean, I still have them, but they just exited primary school. And so I was forced because of the common entrance to really learn all they had to know. And so we do teach actively and test on and more martyrs from grade one, which is like preppy that um, or a 6 year old. We teach about the entire all the ethnic groups, where you came from, why you came here, which years you came in, what did you contribute when you came. Um, so peripheral for age appropriate for 6 to 10 year olds, 6 to 11 year olds, and those are actively taught. If you're talking about the history of our rigged elections, it comes up in high school. It might not, we mightn't call it history, it might be in social studies. I know that recently I saw an assignment where the issue of governance was being examined. The institution of government was being examined, and I saw how a child beautifully wended in the dangers of an undemocratic system, or it was the dangers of a government who was not wedded to democracy, and what those harms would be. So we do teach it, and some of our kids are very aware. There are some children, and I don't mean children, I mean young people, who might not have known where we came from and might not feel the same urgency to protect some of the freedoms we now take for granted. And I think we should teach that. I do think, though, and you must know that when you introduce some topics into schools, that they have to be sensitive to all kinds of issues. And that's why I think sometimes outside of the school, voluntary signing up for some of what you're talking about might be useful.
Yeah, if you give them special credit, at least initial phases, I recognize that you're saying that some of it is actually politically sensitive, but I think there are
Well,
enough
politically
Guyanese.
factual,
Sorry.
sensitive also because you have a diverse
Yeah, so
population.
yeah, so we can actually make it. We have Guyanese who can make it very factual, right? And have the reference to this. And again, I think it's important, and I'm glad you said that you're going to do something about it, right? And I think you know best how you can do
So
this.
we could talk after the program about how to have some of those going.
Yes, I could suggest some things to you. Right. Another topic I raised with you the last time was AI in education, because I know this secondary education is important in there. There are many things in AI that at the moment are hyped, but we know reasonably well that AI will dramatically impact how we learn, what we learn, and how we teach. The role of teacher will definitely change. What step have you taken or plan to take to reimagine education to foster creativity, innovation, say lifelong learning, and well-being? Well-being is important using AI.
You know, it's a very good question. It's one that's being examined in conferences around the world. So the world still hasn't decided how they're going to use AI in education. Their entire convocations, setting up gatherings all over, particularly in Latin America, I see us being invited to quite a few, and I know we've attended a few from the technical level about how AI would impact education, how it can be used, what the harms are, how do we ensure we have originality in our work, and all of that. At this moment, Guyana has allowed teachers to do lesson plans through AI. We have, I am aware that there have been forays into the examinations department about how AI could be responsive to setting questions. I am aware that some teachers have begun to use AI in their classrooms to indicate to teach children that it can be both harmful and useful. But we haven't fully incorporated. I don't think anyone has. I think we're still studying. We are very sure it's here to stay, and that it'll have great benefits. But there are also some drawbacks, and so we are looking to make sure when we do implement that it is done with as many as we know, um, fully informed with whatever information we have at the time. We're not unaware that this is not something we're not going to be able to run from this. In fact, I was very pleased that the president was the feature speaker, our president, at the last CXC summit of ministers of education of the region. I think it was about 2 or 3 weeks ago in Trinidad. And the whole issue was examining how AI and technology can be incorporated into the classroom. So we know a couple of things. COVID taught us all that the premier way of delivering education remains a teacher in front of the classroom. But we also learned that we could amplify what we're doing and we can supplement what we're doing by and facilitate better learning through both physical presence as well as the infusion of technology and technology aided learning. And so in the next 2 or 3 weeks, I'm not giving away the date, that's his to tell, the president is going to be launching the Caribbean's first digital school, e-school, where the idea is to allow children, so we have to change some laws and so on, to stay to homeschool if they want to, or to go to school and have reinforcements through the digital school. So all our curriculum will be uploaded, and he's opening this school to the Caribbean, the wider Caribbean. So we're actually working with a company out of India to build that out, and that's being done robustly now as we speak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know, the reason or the context in which I asked you, because I think you're doing a fantastic job, and the government as a whole, in transforming education in Guyana. And I think that at this moment, Guyana can be a leader in adopting AI and make it and show people how it can be used, because we are a small population, right? And I think we can be a leader in the area rather than waiting for something to happen and follow.
Yeah, well, I hope not as guinea pigs, but yes.
No, not as guinea pig, because
it's here. The problem with this, professor, is if the formal education system doesn't get on board, the children will use it. And so we just have to determine what our parameters are. We are already seeing usage of tools like YouTube and Google, and I'm saying tools, where children could now teach themselves topics that hitherto they were not able to. I couldn't do that. I had to depend on a textbook, which wasn't widely available. You could only get it if your parents could afford it. I had to depend on teachers and what they told me, and things like Encyclopedia Britannica and so on. And that was very, very rare in homes in the country. So it's a very different learning environment. Mm-hmm. And our children have been proficient for a while in the usage of devices and some of these tools. And so it's only a matter of time before we are forced to adopt policies in and around AI. I wouldn't want to rush it. Like
Yeah.
I said, it's new. And while
Yes.
we don't want to follow, as you said, there are peculiarities in the country regarding accessibility to online, to internet, and so on that have to be considered when you're making countrywide policy.
Yeah.
All
And
right.
that leads me directly to the
Let's.
next
All
question.
right,
This is a short one.
Dr.
Uh,
Buru, you got a final question. Let's move on to Dr.
yes.
Ganga.
What is the percentage students in the hinterlands, and how do you access the internet from there?
It depends. In some places, we actually have provided
Mm,
in connectivity, and in some places, they're so remote
mm,
that no one is providing connectivity, so we weren't able to do that. But I'm happy to tell you that we are able to stay in Queens College in Georgetown and teach children at Karasabai, which is in the south, the
mm,
mid south Rupununi, or we were able to teach children in Region 1. And so COVID was horrible in and of itself, but it also brought some opportunities that we're utilizing now. Um, when Bharat Jagdeo as president in 2011 started the Learning Channel, and it's a quote that you can find in the archives. He actually said that his vision for it was that you could take your best math teacher and broadcast mathematics to everyone across the country, to the most remote place. And so, one of the things we've done this in this term was to expand the reach of the Learning Channel by providing to all hinterland communities. We've reached about 94% of the communities so far, and we'll finish the other 6% before the end of this year. Television sets, satellite, and cable, so that they can get the learning channel and have access to all the lessons we're doing there. Very similar to, so they might, where you don't have YouTube, you can get the learning channel where we put our stuff on YouTube, or we play videos in the teaching and learning process on that distance mode.
All right. Thank you very much, Minister. Dr. Ganga, over to you. I know you have been waiting patiently.
Yeah. Thank you, Honorable Minister Manickchand. Thank you for the eloquent summary of universal access to secondary education across the country. I think that's a major accomplishment for Guyana under your leadership. Uh, One of the things that concerned me is still lingering the brain drain and how we determine competitive salaries in Guyana vis-a-vis the Caribbean. And the other aspect is how do we do accountability and assessment measurements in Guyana to keep track of these kind of trends that could become worrisome in terms of staffing and so forth.
Well, I'll answer the for last one first. Yesterday, there was a little boy from valedictorian from President's College who used his forum to hold accountable the teachers he had experienced for 2 years. You may have different views on whether that should be done or not. For me, I believe firmly in the value of free speaking. I believe in the value of our young people holding all their service providers and leaders accountable. And I see that as what he was doing. There has been some criticism, particularly from opposition forces, that he should not have done that and that teachers should have respect. Now, I think I've seen amazing work by teachers who go above and beyond. But in the last 2 days, yesterday I was in Region 2 and I went to the Charity Secondary, Cottonfield Secondary, Abram Zoll Secondary, Johanna Cecilia Secondary, and Aurora Secondary. That's 5 schools. And this morning before Cabinet, I went to Covent Garden. And at all of those schools, 6 schools over the last 2 days, I met with the parents and students of fourth and fifth form. And while I was happy to hear that there are teachers who do more than we ask of them in the interest of their children, like stay back and offer remedial classes, cut short their lunch to do remedial classes. I have been also told of teachers who are not doing anything in the classroom. And the only way to do that and to hold and keep accountable, clearly our system, we had this conversation earlier this afternoon with officers, it's not working because I shouldn't have to go to a school to hear this from parents and students. The monitoring system of the ministry should be able to pick that up, and fix it, not only pick it up, not only learn that it's happening, but fix it. And so accountability for me is more than just a word. It has greater value than we could even put a measurement on. Because if teachers teach, for example, children will actually get the benefit of that. And if they don't, it's entire classrooms that you're wrecking. So I believe we have to be accountable. I think we have done a good job of, and I think I can say that with objectivity, of leading in a way that show people that we are accountable. We do answer. We are out more than in, talking to people, hearing from them, and accounting to them about what we want to do, what we have done, what the progress is, what the impact is, and hearing back from people their view. One of the reasons I was in Cotton Field yesterday was to consult with the population there, both school population as well as community population, about where we want to build our new Cotton Field Secondary School. That is being true to our constitution, which says that where we have stakeholders, we must consult with them, Article 13, before we make decisions that would affect their lives. So we believe in being accountable. Is that transcending to all the service providers at the rate that we would like to see that transcend? That's a question up for debate.
Just to follow up on like you said, the success of accountability, do we have any plans for formal assessment processes? Because as I
Of who? Assessment of who?
know,
Children, teachers?
it will be both, and the institution itself.
We
Say,
do formal assessments both international at the exit levels, like primary exit and secondary exit, and at an international standard. But we also have what you call end of term tests and quizzes and so on all the time for children. For teachers, we have a outdated way of determining who should be promoted. We have to move away, and I've said it before, from the place where once you came into the system early enough and you've lived long enough, you will be promoted. It has to be based on merit. And we have to change out our regulations, our rules, our processes to make sure our promotions are merit based. Because and it's not, it's far more than trying to take away a promotion from someone. I see what happens before my eyes when there's poor leadership in a school or in any system. We see what happens. Entire schools get damaged. The entire children population in those schools come out with less than they should have. The children whose parents are able to access resources that are not public are the ones who will do better. We have to move away from that. We have to equalize the system. We can't just have a system where those who can afford it do well and those who can't afford the outside resources are left to the mercies of a system. And wherever you have strong headships, wherever you have strong administration in the school, I've seen strong administration bring up schools from a place of almost non-existence on the academic scale to a place of doing very, very well. And I've seen the opposite. Administrations take good schools, take over from a good administrator, and really wreck what the school looks like in academic and other output. And so we had this conversation this afternoon, and I feel very strongly about it. We have to move away from routinely promoting people. You have to earn your promotion by the acts you've done. And it should not be based on how old you are, because we have some younger people doing very, very well and wanting to do well and have qualified themselves to do well. And it should not be based on what it's based on now. It's outdated and it does not meet the needs of our system. So we're
So
looking at that.
so that's a big plus there, to have formal assessments and to be able to use it both at the teacher's level and at the student level, and in terms of the curriculum and the resources that are being provided to implement the school's curriculum or the national curriculum. I would like to look at this, the role of the private sector, that there miss two kinds of information. Sometimes they say that government salary scales are above that of the private sector, and so on. So there needs to be some reconciliation there. Now, if I step into the shoes of the student would look forward to a ladder of promotion. So the student would say, okay, when I leave high school, I would like to be so and so and so. So they're looking for apprenticeships and scholarships. And that's an important set of tools or opportunities that we can use to help the students to motivate themselves and prepare either for higher education or the labor force. So how do we keep track? Can you comment on that?
We haven't a formal, so we do something every year in what you call the summer months, July, August, where students come into various government agencies and some private sector agencies to work for that time, so they kind of get a feel of what that place is doing. We don't have, and I think it comes down to having not wanting to overblow salary pay book, pay sheets, and so on. We don't have an official apprenticeship system. The University of Guyana, for their civil, mechanical, and those programs, they have to do 2 years at UG and then go work 2 years somewhere. Well, sorry, 1 year somewhere, and then come back to finish off their university degree. That is not UG finding the person, the private sector place for them. It would be students who are to find that. All of our TVET institutions have embedded in them apprenticeship. So we buy furniture, for example, from in large measure from our TVET institutions where the students make them. If you can pull up, if I had someone who could do that for me, pulled up where we could pull up a few weeks ago, maybe 3, 4 weeks ago, I went to visit a fellowship practical instruction center at the Willem on the west coast of Demerara. We commissioned that school, and the furniture there, the food there. It's a practical instruction center. The shoe racks, all that they were using was made by the students. The circuit systems for electricity, and that's what we're doing at all our TVET institutions. There's built-in apprenticeship programs through those. For high school children, we don't have formal apprenticeship with private sector persons, and we have some limitations regarding what age children could work at without it being child labor. So we don't have at a high school level, but we do at all our TVET institutions.
That sounds good, but what I would like you to comment on is, how do we break this down by institution? I've seen wonderful things if we look at the institutions. I grew up in the Bank of Guyana, and we had lots of opportunities there, and the staff generally motivated themselves to take advantage of that. Recently, I've seen 10 magistrates being added to help with the judiciary system. Now, do we have opportunities there for when students leave the high school. They can go in there as clerks
Oh
to
yeah.
serve.
So there's no we don't have a formal engagement. So I thought you were talking about our institutions. For example, Carnegie has own its own restaurant where students work there and earn also. Our high schools have a CVQ program where today we discussed at the cabinet level how we could have agricultural departments at school self-sufficient even as they satisfy the need of the country for certain produce. So it's the apprenticeship is built into some of the programs. If you're talking about people going off to work at banks, historically, and you might have seen that if you spent years at the Bank of Guyana, a large percentage of our secondary school leavers work at the banks, the insurance companies, come back into the school system to teach, and some go off to tertiary education. But that's not a formal engagement between the Ministry of Education and those places. It is where the children or young people get work. We have more than 600 children who will be graduating soon with CVQ, the Caribbean Vocational Qualification, across the country, and that's not limited to Georgetown alone. That allows them to go into workplaces almost immediately with their skills, and then from there, at an entry level, from there they can do CVQ2, CVQ3, and build up those skills. So, and we do see a high demand for them. We had engagements with the private sector, particularly through COVID, about what Coursera subjects they wanted to see, or they thought would be useful in their various organizations or institutions or shops or stores. And those were the subjects we encouraged people to do on the Commonwealth Coursera collaboration, which turned out to record Guyana as the largest, the highest, the country with the highest number of graduates and the largest uptick in the shortest possible time. So it tells you our country's appetite for training and continuous training and lifelong learning. Up to today, I had someone messaging me about how those can become formalized for use in the system. That's Coursera certificates. So while we don't have a formal engagement with private sector taking a particular number or quota, this is what practically happens when our
Okay.
children graduate.
Just one last question. Can a student leave high school and go back and teach in the high school?
Yes. So we have some of that. Can they go back and teach forever without training? No, because we said every teacher who wants to teach must train. But they can teach for a few years, 2 years, um, while they are either studying themselves or doing gap years. We have actually found that some of our student teachers are effective because they communicate well with children, and that they are very au fait with the topic given their freshness of having studied it themselves. So I've seen that myself. We ourselves benefited from that when we were younger, where persons just exiting Cape would well, it would have been Cape at the time, just exiting A levels, would come back in and teach. I remember my chemistry as well as my physics teacher at in third form were both former students who had just finished A levels and come back in to teach us, and I felt like I they made me do science because they were good to in explaining and dealing with and so on.
All
I
right.
might
Thank you.
add just one
And in the
last comment.
hinterland communities, it's
Oh, hold
actually necessary
Yeah,
on.
I
because
might
we learn
just add that I left high school and went back and taught at Covent Garden Secondary.
I was
Math,
there today, this morning.
math, chemistry, physics, biology, and Spanish at that high school.
How
And
Okay.
long did you teach for?
I taught for about a year plus because from there I went to the Bank of Guyana to work.
More lucrative, right?
But prior but prior to going to Covent Garden, I was at the Statistical Bureau, and
Mm.
then I left that job. I went
Okay.
into teaching. Okay, thank you, Dr. Tai.
All right.
Thank you, Miss.
This before we close, do you have an idea how many students you have in the higher in secondary education at the
Yeah,
public
so in
level?
in in secondary public schools we have just over 54,000 children, and yeah, so secondary just over 54,000.
54,000.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and how many teachers in the secondary system? Yeah, do you have that figure?
Teachers in the secondary system. Um, I think of our 14,000 teachers, the majority of our teachers are in primary. We have about 6,000 plus secondary teachers.
Second teacher. Are any teachers in the
Remember, teachers in secondary are specialized. So you'd have a math teacher, a home economics teacher, rather than the
Mhm.
primary school where
But
the one teacher teaches
so
everything.
all the teachers in the secondary system are qualified.
Or getting qualified. So we currently have in the system 100% of our teachers are either trained or in training. We do, sorry, it wouldn't be 100, it would be about 98%. We have a couple of teachers who have been teaching for, by a couple, I mean less than 200, who have been
Mm.
teaching for the last 30 years. They did not get trained, they don't have degrees, and they're about to retire 2 3 years. The program of study will actually take longer than their time for retirement. And as a matter of being humane, we are not putting them off the jobs because they have served this nation.
Mm.
And these are particularly teachers in the hinterland. There are 5,000 secondary teachers. Just so I said around 6,000. I'd correct it to say around 5,000.
Mhm. And
Um, yeah.
okay, finally, Dr. Budu, you want to make a final comment
Well,
because we
yes, one final comment. I like the idea of performance based metric for promotion. I'm glad that you're serious about it because even as a full professor, I was evaluated like other professors, evaluated by the student on my quality of teaching. I was peer reviewed every year by my department, by the college, by the university before you get any increase in pay yearly, right? That doesn't include promotion. Promotion is a special. So I'm glad that even at that level that you're talking about, that is be performance based.
Mm.
Mm.
Dr. Ganga, your final comment?
Yes, do we have online or can we purchase a comprehensive syllabus for the secondary education? You know,
It's
like the
all online. So if you're looking for CSEC, which would be managed by this Caribbean Examinations Council, it's online at their website. We have also shared it on our webpage. And so you can access that very easily, subject by subject. So you go to cxe.org and you'll get those syllabi. And then our lower grades, we have those also on our website.
thank you for that.
Okay, Minister, you have an idea how many graduates you produce through the Tibet system on an annual basis?
On an annual basis. We have about 13 TVET institutions. We've just added two, and we have three more to add on a large basis. I mean, very state of the art kind of institutions. And we just started one at Northwest in Mabaroma. I just opened one at Fellowship. There's one in Bartica. There's one in St. Ignatius. There's one at Hope Town. There's one in Better for Walking that we're opening. Prior to that, we had opened a Lenora Technical Vocational Education Center and Myconi, and we had already existing in regions 2, 6, and 10, as well as Georgetown. On an annual basis, how many do we graduate? So this is hard to say for this reason, off the top of my head. Um, you can leave year one with certain certification. You can leave year two with certain certification. So I'd have to disaggregate that for you, and I never like giving you
Mm.
numbers that
Okay.
are not accurate.
All right. Thank you very much. Shamisa, do we have any time for question and answer?
We have a few questions Dr.
Okay, go
Tara
ahead. Go
will
ahead.
ask.
Proceed.
This question is from Marcina Ramertan. She says, Minister, please, pleasant evening. Can you look into why John Moore Liverpool is taking over 4 months now to send our master's certificate?
Who?
John Moore's Liverpool.
John Moore, Liverpool.
Is that a program on
I'm
goal?
not sure.
I
Marcina,
don't.
if you're watching, can you give us some clarification as to what exactly, or where exactly are you looking for? But she's asking something in regards to their master's certificate.
Mm.
I can have a look at it afterwards, but it's a little bit of a vague question. If it's
Mhm.
an arrangement she has herself with the university, because there's no John Moore here, so it must be an overseas university, perhaps an online kind of course.
Well,
If
yeah, I think it's if goal is, I think the response was goal UK.
goal at John Moore, I can ask. I don't know right now why that is. So I'm
And
writing it
then,
down.
and I can send more information for you too as
Sure.
I look back at the program. The upper
Yes.
and lower class Cape at President College is doing self study and all the work with the help from teachers. What is the ministry doing to help those children?
Help them how? Self study how? So
This
let me
thing
tell
that
you,
the kids are doing self study,
because teachers aren't
the
teaching.
teachers are hardly there.
So that was the complaint of a student yesterday at his graduation. So I am aware that the ministry staff is listening to this, because I know that the student yesterday, his complaint, whether you like that he did it there or not, was that um, they needed more support teaching from teachers, and so we are going to, um, if you can give the, if yeah, I'll look for the comment, but it's something we have to look at, so we can't brush that under the carpet. Like I said, I visited 6 schools over the last 2 days, actively, not just popped in and popped out and had a photo opportunity. I mean, I spent time explaining what we were trying to do with our mathematics intervention program and listening to parents about what their challenges are. Uh, and so the issue of teachers not teaching has to be looked at. It has to be dealt with, and we have to make sure that's not a widespread something. And if it is, that we're addressing it. Look, there's
Thank
very
you.
little else that is sacred, but if you're going to take a job to teach, and you are going to get paid for it, and you're going to swear in an oath. I saw teachers take just 2 weeks ago that this is what you will do to the best of your ability, then we have to get it done, because too
I,
many children suffer when you don't.
I agree. This question is from Ramona Bear Karim. She says, what is the ministry doing about school dropouts? I heard of some cases here in Leonora. The full stories of these young boys are alarming.
Yeah, we have gotten some good reports internationally about lessening dropouts. So when COVID happened, the worldwide prediction was that um, countries would see remarkably large and startlingly large numbers of early school leavers. They dressed it up. They meant dropouts. I'm very, very, very pleased to say that while we have not made the zero, we have been able to stem that. It was a prediction. All of the studies during COVID said that was going to be something that happened, and learning loss was going to be something that we could not prevent. And I'm happy to say that we have not seen the kind of dropout phenomenon that was predicted, and that didn't happen by accident. The government has been clear that we're going to support parents through cash grants. We're going to give large investments to parents through textbooks and other resources that we were going to invest in, and we have done that. Putting counselors and guidance and counseling officers and social workers into most of our high schools. Where we simply don't have that skill. That's why they don't have. And that has seen us not suffer from the predictions that even first world countries have realized post COVID, the predictions of the various studies. So we don't have the numbers we have now. To Ramona Karim, I would say even one is one too many, and I'm glad that you're concerned about whatever you see in Lenore and that you're raising it here. That's good citizenship and citizenry, but we don't have the numbers that we had expected. I am going to have someone look at Lenora particularly. I'm not sure if they're dropouts. We have a dorm in Lenora, a dormitory, um, where or the children from the islands in the Essequibo River come out and go to Lenora Secondary because they don't have secondary schools and the population is too small to take off secondary schools. So we'll have to check and make sure it is dropouts and not young people who live in the community that may have a little bit less supervision than the regular home.
Thank you. This question is from Daniel Harinarayan. When will the salary, I'm not sure if it's normally between education officers and teachers will be addressed? Right now on HOD are getting a higher salary with allowances than education officer with the same level of qualification. The EO is the supervisor. Don't mention the HMS salary of grade A school.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's a little bit.
So I understand what they're saying. They're saying that the person who's supervising them they're getting more than the person who is really supervising them. And it is a concern we have raised with the relevant authorities that deal with these issues. Unfortunately, we don't get to the Ministry of Education or indeed any ministry to set prices or salaries higher. I don't know that it's necessarily true that an education officer is earning less than an HOD. Education officers have other benefits that HODs wouldn't necessarily get unless they reach a certain eligibility criteria. Education officers are benefit from duty free uh, and other kinds of salaries and benefits, but it is something we're looking at. There was one time, and that has changed now, where people didn't want to come to our NSERD, which is our nerve center, because their salaries would be stagnant and they'd be able to make more as head teachers. And I mean, while it shouldn't all be about money, I do understand that people have bills to pay. And so we're looking at it.
Perfect. Thank you. Minister will now ask you for your closing remarks.
Yeah, I am very hopeful about where we are. I've seen how we started off with about 3,000 seats that needed to be provided in different secondary schools across the country. In Georgetown alone, we had 800 children who couldn't be placed properly in secondary schools. In in Region 3, we had 1,500 children who couldn't be placed in secondary schools. I like how we have been able to, in a very short space of time, and I think at some point this story should be written, um, and the magnitude of what we undertook here. I love that we're going to be able to provide those spaces. I really like that I'm seeing in young people their ability and willingness, and I keep experiencing that over the last couple of days where I've been meeting them. Their ability and willingness to speak up on issues that are bothering them, respectfully, of course. I know that's a change that we have to engender and usher in the country. We're not accustomed to children speaking up in the country. We may be from a generation of you must be seen and not heard, but we've moved away from that, and we have to make sure that we allow our children to speak up. I think it's necessary. I think we saw very clearly how a population who was vocal about not having our will stolen from us in the last election about making sure our votes counted, how that population inspired the world to stand with Guyana to make sure democracy prevailed here. And so, if we don't need to look very far to make sure to get a fine example of how training people and allowing people freedoms like speaking up are would be beneficial to not only those individuals but to those who come after them and to the country as a whole. I like that I see more interest in people, in parents, particularly in being involved in their children's lives. Of course, there are exceptions to everything. So I think we're at a really good, hopeful place. Right now, we're training more young people than ever before in the history of Guyana. We have 30,000 people, mostly young people, on the Guyana Online Academy of Learning, where they're studying at 20 foreign universities for all kinds of different degrees and in very different fields for degrees and masters and PhDs. I love how people have are volunteering their efforts in communities. So we're at a really very good place. There are challenges. There are challenges in the education system, particularly, and I think the main one would be persons not doing what they're supposed to do across the sector, whether it's at the teacher level or at an admin level or at an education officer level. That's not to say that nobody does what they're supposed to do. That's to say that even if one person in an entire school of 60 teachers doesn't get it right, that one teacher could wreck what happens to various students who are depending on classroom instruction. So we have those challenges. We have the challenges of change being something hard to wrap your head around. We have the challenges of people being accustomed to a system that is a lot slower than it is right now. So, um, you have to constantly urge for pace to be improved. We have the challenges of contractors not sticking to their end of the bargain in terms of finishing properties and schools that we're building and at a quality that they really should give us. But with all of that, we have a president who has made it very clear that nothing is going to stop this Guyana he's building out. We have a vice president who's made it clear that we are going to be the guardrails around democracy and safeguarding people's rights in various ways and promoting different opportunities for children and young people by not only using traditional routes, but by actively going out and recruiting persons and pointing them in the direction of opportunities and creating opportunities for people. Guyana is a really exciting time to be. I think I hope you can feel it, although you're distant. It's a very exciting place to be in right now, and it's if you take 6 months to come back here, your road networks and all of that will make you dizzy.
I was just there, and yes, it is an exciting time to be in Guyana. Thank you so much to our entire panel. Thank you guys for being here. To our viewers, thank you. And to our Honorable Minister, thank you for taking the time to be here.
Yes.
Until next time, I am your host, Shamiza Ali, and this is the Guyana Dialogue. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Shamida.
Good
Thank
evening.
you, Minister.
Bye
Thank you,
bye.
panelists.
Good night to
Good
everyone.
night.
Very